Savinaka and welcome to tonight's show. The European Union has been ideally present in the Pacific for as far back as colonization. Now the fifth high-level political dialogue between the EU and Fiji will take place in Suva, and the Cotonou Agreement, which governs Fiji and the Pacific's relations with the EU, comes to an end this year. And here with me in studio to tell us more about what happens after the Cotonou Agreement expires and to also discuss about EU's top priorities this year is the Ambassador to the Pacific, Ambassador Sujiro Seam. Welcome to the show, sir.
Bula Christina, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too. Now, can you describe the relationship between the EU and Fiji?
Well,
how would you describe it? Yeah.
Fiji is very strong. We are very strong strategic partners in the Pacific and in the world. Our strategic partnership is built on common values, and I think it's a very good sign that Fiji is the first country in the Pacific which has ratified all the Human Rights Convention. It is also built on shared economic opportunities, and Fiji is one of the countries with which in the Pacific we have concluded an economic partnership agreement to give access to the private sector in Fiji to the single largest free market in the world, the European market. And also we're also very significant development partners with a very ambitious program.
Now, Ambassador, why was Fiji listed as one of the non-cooperative jurisdictions list that was released by the EU on the 12th of March last year?
Well, the process actually started in December 2017 when Fiji was put on what we call the grey list, and then it was put on the blacklist in March 2019. There are two lines of consideration here. The first one is that Fiji still has to join and apply some international standards on tax transparency and exchange of information. And the second line of consideration is that Fiji applies what we qualify as harmful tax regimes to attract foreign direct investments.
Now, what would it take for Fiji to get out of this list?
Well, I was very clear when I met with the Fijian authorities, starting with the Prime Minister and the Minister for Economy and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. My goal is the same as Fiji's goal. It's to remove Fiji from that list. To that effect, they have to join and effectively apply these international standards on tax transparency and exchange of information. And also they have to review and revisit their harmful tax regimes to make sure that they do not introduce discrepancies or divergencies or are not harmful to international relations.
What are the threats if Fiji is still not removed from this? What are the threats for Fiji and the opportunities lost for Fiji if we do not make the effort to come out of this list?
Feel that, of course, there is no direct sanction associated with that list in the sense that we do not suspend our development assistance or we do not lower the level of our commitment with Fiji. But of course, it's an instrument for international investment, and it is a disincentive to private companies to invest in Fiji.
Now, why was Fiji not included in the list of countries with visa-free access to the Schengen area despite Fiji multiple requests to be included in the visa-free Schengen areas?
You know, Christina, migration and visa, it's a very sensitive issue in Europe because of the situation we have to face now with a strong influx of refugees and the tension we encounter in that area. So what we discussed with the Fijian government is that we would wait until a new leadership is established in Europe, and it is now the case. You know that we have a new president of the European Commission, we have a new college of commissioners, so I think now is the time to restart that process to work towards visa-free access for Fijian citizens.
Does the EU have a time frame to when Fiji will be included in this list or when the next review will take place?
Well, it's always a very lengthy process because of the negotiations involved. It requires a proposal from the European Commission, but then it's up to the 27 member states to make the decision. So we can only anticipate a very long negotiation before we can reach that goal. The important thing is that now there is this willingness to start that process.
Thank you for that, Ambassador Seam. Now stay with us. We'll discuss what happens after the Cotonou Agreement comes to an end this year after the break. Welcome back to the show and thanks for joining us. Now, for those of you who've just recently joined us here on the set with the EU Ambassador to Fiji and the Pacific, Ambassador Sujiro Seam. Now, the Cotonou Agreement, sir, I'm aware, is coming to an end this year. And my question to you is, how different will the new agreement be from the Cotonou Agreement, or what can the people of the Pacific expect from the new agreement that will be signed later this year?
Well, first, Christina, I think it would be useful for your viewers to know exactly what the Cotonou Agreement is. So it's the framework agreement which manages the relationship between the countries of the European Union and the 79 countries which are in Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific, the so-called ACP countries. It was concluded for 20 years. It expires in February this year. So indeed, negotiations have started to renew that agreement. And in the new generation of agreement, which, by the way, we expect to be signed in Samoa, and it will be the first time that this framework agreement will not be signed in Africa. So I think it's a very good sign for the Pacific. The main changes are the following. First, the architecture of the agreement will combine a foundation agreement, which will be valid for everyone, and a Pacific protocol. So there will be a specific Pacific element to this new framework. Then we have already agreed on the main priorities, and these priorities will be peace and security, that will be human rights, democracy and good governance, that would be human and social development, that would be inclusive and sustainable growth and development, that would also be migration, and that would be environment and climate. For the Pacific, there will be a specific priority on oceans and ocean-related issues. So you can see that actually with this new framework agreement, the Post-Cotonou agreement, we will focus on what matters for the countries of the Pacific and what matters for Fiji.
So for these specific areas of needs that you've located to render your support to in the Pacific, how do you identify these areas?
Well, it's always a dialogue between the countries and the region to identify priorities. Of course, this is a comprehensive agreement. This is a strategic agreement, so it touches upon political issues, economic issues, and development issues. On development issues, the process to identify the priority is a dialogue with the government of Fiji and the stakeholders in Fiji. Just to give you an example, right now in the current period, our development assistance focuses on three priorities. The first one is agriculture and rural livelihood through budget support, which is to say that we give money directly from the European taxpayers to Fiji so that they could spend on improvement of agriculture and rural livelihood. The second basket is about governance. So we support the civil society, we support access to justice, we support the fight against violence against women. And the third basket is, of course, climate change and sustainable development. So in that area, for example, after TC Winston, we provided an assistance, a specific assistance of 10 million euros.
So these three areas, they differ every time you render your support.
Well, that's the purpose of the dialogue we have to enter into with the government of Fiji and the stakeholders in Fiji to determine if they want to continue, and I suspect that climate change and ocean-related issues will remain high on the agenda, but also to see if they want to adapt and adjust and select new areas for cooperation.
So this dialogue, what stakeholders are we looking at when you're saying that the stakeholders within this dialogue? Are they just from the government or also CSOs?
Yes,
and NGOs?
well, primarily we discuss with the government of Fiji, and that's the purpose of our political dialogue. We will have one this year, we have one every year, and certainly this year it will be very topical to go for an in-depth discussion on what our priorities for the next generation of assistance from the European Union to Fiji would be. But also, you know, it's in our DNA from the European Union to work with all the stakeholders. So we support the civil society, we support the non-governmental organizations, we discuss with all branches of government, and we discuss with the private sector. So we will try to involve everyone to make sure that we have a comprehensive consultation before we make decisions.
What areas will you be focusing on when you write the new agreement, and why?
Well, this is not really the European Union itself which is writing the new agreement. It is, of course, the outcome of a negotiation. And for the Pacific, the main negotiators are from Papua New Guinea and from Samoa. So you could also ask them what their priorities would be. This is not a unilateral exercise where we put on paper what we want to address in the next generation, but again we have agreed that our priorities will be the ones that I've already described, which basically are a way for us to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and prosperity and peace and a better world for the people and a better planet for the Pacific.
Now stay with us, we've got more coming up after the break. Welcome back to the show and thanks for joining us. Now the fifth Fiji high-level political dialogue between the EU and Fiji will be happening this year, Ambassador. Now, what are some of the priority areas that you will be discussing on?
Well, first of all, this political dialogue takes place in the context of the Cotonou Agreement. So we have to organize this exchange at the highest possible level between the European Union and Fiji every year. We alternate between Fiji and Brussels. So last year we had it in Brussels. This year we will have it in Fiji. And I'm very much looking forward to having this political dialogue here in Fiji. It's always an opportunity for us to review in a comprehensive manner all the aspects of our relationship. So we discuss political issues, we discuss economic issues, and we discuss development issues. I guess high on the agenda for the next political dialogue in Fiji, we will have to address the main concerns expressed to us by the Fijian government and also the top priority issues for the European Union. Among them, we will have the taxation issue, we will have the visa issue, we will have the implementation of the European Partnership Agreement on the economic side of it, and we would have the discussion on the identification of the priorities for the next generation of program in the context of the Post-Cotonou Agreement.
That's a lot of areas to cover within a meeting. Now, how long is this meeting usually take both parties?
Well, it usually takes a half day to a day, but not everything happens during the meeting. Of course, we have to work before the meeting to prepare for the meeting. Yeah? So hopefully we will have a fruitful dialogue with a strong and robust preparation, especially on the most sensitive issues before we get into the political dialogue. So I'm very hopeful that working with the Fijian government and the other stakeholders, we can deliver good outcomes at the political dialogue itself.
Is there a mechanism that you both agree on to ensure that whatever is discussed is carried out through? Given the extensive areas of this?
The outcome of the political dialogue is a joint outcome. We have draft minutes that we agree upon, and they become the joint minutes of the political dialogue, and this is our roadmap for the next political dialogue.
Is there another mechanism for you to check that both are following through with whatever you have both agreed on?
Well, Christina, that's the life of a diplomat. You always have to be on the ball. So in between political dialogues, we will keep the channel of communications open between officials from Brussels and officials from Suva, so that we can address the outstanding issues and make progress. So right now we have started to work in particular on the three most sensitive issues, which are visa and taxation and the Economic Partnership Agreement. We also started our dialogue on the identification of the priorities for the next generation of program. So we're well on track, but indeed the political dialogue, it's only the final outcome. So we have to keep working throughout the year to make sure that we have a successful outcome for the political dialogue.
Now, in 2017, it was mentioned by a predecessor that the EU had 45 million Fijian dollars to support the agriculture sector in Fiji, and that preparation of this program is ongoing close cooperation with the government. Now, what is the update on this?
Well, this is through one of the three different ways and means we support Fiji, because we have three different series of instruments. This is about budget support. So budget support, again, it's money which comes from the EU taxpayers, which is allocated to the government of Fiji so that they could support and finance the priorities we have jointly identified. For Fiji, this priority is about agricultural development, it's about rural livelihood. So we agree to support the strategy, which will be implemented by Fiji in that area, and to that effect we will have well, it's the same amount. We allocated 20 million euros for that particular priority over the course of the next 4 years. So we agreed on the strategy, and we are taking steps right now to complete our internal procedures so that we could allow this money to be spent as soon as possible. This is only one branch of what we do in Fiji, and of course, you know, it's a multi-annual program, so it's not 20 million euros or 50 million Fijian dollars for 1 year. But altogether, in average, we spend in Fiji from the European budget around 10 million euros or 25 million Fijian dollars. The largest share of it goes through this budget support to agriculture and rural livelihood, but we also have other programs, in particular on governance and on climate change and sustainability as well.
Now, is the EU starting to realize that Fiji and the Pacific can offer serious trade and business to EU and vice versa, despite the vast geographical distance between EU and the Pacific? Yes,
I think the best example of business opportunities between Fiji and the European Union was the acquisition of 2 Airbus A350s. You know, Airbus, of course, is a European company, and that's a very big success for the European Union, but it's also a success for Fiji, and it shows the potential that we can utilize and that we can work on to make sure that we develop this relationship not only in the political area or on development matters, but also on business, economy and trade. So to that effect, the main instrument we have is what we call the Economic Partnership Agreements. It's a trade agreement which gives duty-free, quota-free access to the European market, which of course is the single largest free market in the world, 500 million consumers with very high purchasing power. Fiji exports right now mostly sugar and agricultural products and fisheries products. In the other direction, they import airplanes, but also cars and equipment and machinery, which will contribute to the further development of Fiji. But I think we can do more in that area to make sure that we maximize the opportunities which are offered in that particular subject. And to that effect, we have a regional program to support the private sector and economic integration. So we provide aid for trade, we provide trade facilitation, we provide assistance to address regulatory issues, we provide assistance to improve the business environment, the investment climate, and also to strengthen value chains which will be involved in export sectors.
Now, this is a growing concern for China's growing presence in the region. Is the EU concerned about China's growing presence in the region and their growing allies as well?
Well, I'm not concerned at all. You know, people always ask us how we position ourselves vis-à-vis other countries. I think the European Union is a global player. We have our own strategy. Our strategy is to improve our relationship with all the countries of the region. Of course, we also have diplomatic relations with China, and we cooperate, and we have to cooperate on many issues.
And that was your close-up show for this week. For feedbacks or comments, please do not hesitate to contact us on 330-5100 or simply drop us an email at news@fijitv.com.fg. Thank you so much for your company. From the team and I, do have a productive week ahead and good night.